Hey there, thanks for tuning back in to another episode. We got a great one in store for you. We have quarterbacks all show long and a special guest to help us break down our quarterback rookie rankings. You're not going to want to miss this. So Operation Domination starts now.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about Mr. Pointless fantasy this
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Let's get into our rookie quarterback conversations that we want to have. So Cam Ward is consensus wise everyone's top quarterback, and that is the expectation is that the Titans are going to take Cam Ward. In fact, they're going to have a private workout with him soon. And look, Cam Ward had a fantastic season, transfers over to Miami. He struck gold in a couple of different ways. One, he got a much better team. He did improve his mechanics on his part to kind of shine a little bit. And three, the other part he struck at was that this quarterback class isn't that great. So he's able to kind of skyrocket to the top of it. And he looks like he has the best physical attributes of the class as far as being a passer is concerned, along with some of the refinement that needs to go with it to be the number one pick. Adam, I go to you. Tennessee Titans, they take Cam Ward. Let's focus on this from the standpoint of, is he a good fit with Callahan and some of the weapons that they have there?
I think so. I think the big thing for him is they're doing a better job of figuring out this offensive line. I think there's still work to be done, but I think it's going in the right direction largely. I think that is key for him. I think it's key for a lot of these rookies, candidly. I mean, none of them I thought were impressive, like from the pocket in regards to pressure. If anything, Ward was one of the guys who panicked the least, but I think that's kind of the problem. He was almost a little too nonchalant about pressure. You catch him standing straight up, like ball at his hip, quite a bit. But as far as the weapons, I mean, look, he's great at making plays on his own. He's great at going down the field. You wish that there was more of a one here, but I think he can kind of make that work. I think, again, for a lot of these rookies, just having a line in place is going to be key, and this is a decent opportunity for him.
Jeremy, what do you make of Cam Ward? Is he definitely the number one guy on your board? And two, from a dynasty perspective, what do you think his value truly is?
Yeah, he's the clear one for me. He was a guy that I liked prior to this season. Watching him at Washington State, I really liked what his game pertained to. A guy that does have a decent pocket awareness, like you said there. Adam, he does sit in there a little bit longer than you would love to see at times, but he also has that ability to enough mobility to escape that. We see that on the regularities of like those, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen just kind of scrambling for dear life in the backfield and then ripping one down the field type of throws from Cam Ward. So the line obviously can always be improved. We want that no matter what team you are at the NFL level. But of this class, I feel like he's one that has enough creativity to be able to survive a situation like that. Jackson Dart's pretty well at it as well. Shedeur Sanders a little bit less, still has that ability, but yeah, as far as Cam Ward goes, I like everything that he has. Like you said, Dan, the physical tools and traits are definitely here. He has a strong arm. He can push the ball down the pocket or down the field fairly well from in the pocket or outside the pocket. And again, I think he's better in the short to intermediate type of areas. I think he's going to fit very well into Callahan's system. He isn't going to rely totally on his legs. He's going to have a little bit of that ability to spread the football out. We saw it at Washington State where he didn't have the best talent and was still a very productive passer and be able to move the football down the field. So I'm not too worried about the lack of necessarily talent thus far in that receiver room. But Calvin Ridley's enough. You can move the ball with one player at the NFL level if need be. And I do think they will add to that, and which is a good class for accessory pieces at the receiver position that they could potentially add later in the draft. So I still have faith that he's going to be good as far as dynasty goes. I don't think he's a consistent top 5 player by any means because of that lack of mobility. He can move. He could be used in the red zone type of area, but he is more of Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, where it's like, okay, you got a 3rd and short. Let's stress the defense with a bootleg or a quarterback rollout, something to those effects, where he's not Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, where they're going to draw up a quarterback power by any means. So he has enough of that, which can be used in the red zone to have those rushing touchdowns, which will help him a little bit. So I do think that he could be a top 12 quarterback at some point in his career. He's going to need a little bit more help. He's not to that point where he's elevating, Valdez Scantling to a viable receiver, but he definitely has the ability to distribute the ball well, smartly, and push the ball down the field. So I think he could fall into that low-end quarterback 1, high-end quarterback 2 regularities, the Kirk Cousins, the Derek Carrs of the past, similarities of it into that territory as far as a fantasy asset goes.
Well, to kind of add to the names that you're talking about there, I have him player comp to Jordan Love. I think they have a lot of the same type of skill sets. Deep thrower, mobile, but it's not going to be a dual threat rusher. But I like the fact he's going to give his receivers chances down the field, which in turn can also get you those big fantasy plays, those big blow-up games, and have those possibilities. On the flip side, he also is somebody who's going to probably turn over the ball quite a bit. And I think we're going to see that especially early in his first year with the suspect offensive line and outside of Calvin Ridley, yet to see exactly what the weapons are going to look like. I want to ask you one follow-up question, though. If you're in a Superflex Dynasty League, are you going to take Cam Ward or are you going to take Ashton Genty at number 1?
Genty. Yeah.
No, I'm in the same boat. I just wanted to see what you would say there. Of course, there are not everyone is Cam Ward number 1. Chris here might have a controversial take for all of us here. Chris, who is your quarterback 1?
Yeah, I have Shedeur Sanders as my number 1. Look, I like Cam Ward. I'm a U fan as well. But I also want to point out Cam Ward played in college for 5 years. And in 2 years junior college, 2 years in Washington State, and then you had last year in Miami where he exploded. And I think a lot of the numbers that we talk about and all this kind of hype around him is based off the idea of what he did in Miami last year. But looking back what his career was very much closer to some of the people that we're kind of throwing shade on, such as Shedeur Sanders, and I'll get to him in a second. But Cam Ward, for example, his numbers in Washington State, the 2 years he was there, his average was approximately about 24 touchdowns, about 8 interceptions, about 65% completion percentage, 7.1 yards per attempt. Air yards were about 7.34 air yards. And he had average about sacked about 42 times a time. Excuse me, got sacked about 42 times. So then he explodes last year. He has 9.5 yards per attempt. He has 5.2 yards air yards per attempt, and he was only sacked 22 times. One of the things you guys were talking about when we got to this Tennessee team was the offensive line and the need for a good offensive line. Miami's offensive line was way better than Washington State's offensive line, and I think that you got to see some of the results of that. Where Shedeur Sanders, on the other hand, had to basically carry 2 different programs. Started off at Jacksonville State, team that was 1-11 before he got there, turned him into a contender, left there after 2 years, went to Colorado, a team that had won 1 game the previous year, got them ranked at some points in the season. Now they wound up winning 4 games, but the following year they won 9 games. I bring it up because we throw the word winner around with quarterbacks a lot. This guy basically did carry his team. This isn't a situation where you're at Alabama and you won, or you're at Michigan and you won, where they have the things around you. This is a situation where they're rebuilding entire teams around you, and you're one or the 2 best players on your team. Yes, we all love Travis Hunter, who is a part-time receiver, but there was no other receivers for Shedeur Sanders to throw to on that Colorado team. Not one of them got drafted last year. Xavier Weaver was an undrafted free agent who made Arizona's team. No offensive lineman made the team. Nobody from the defense got drafted. Then the following year, this upcoming season, maybe you have Jimmy Horn gets drafted. Hunter maybe does. I say all that because we've seen Shedeur. I'm sorry, what did you say, Dan?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So
Hunter's going he's the first quarterback taken off the board, most likely.
A receiver. We'll see what he does as a receiver or not. But I bring that up. I bring all that to points to say that Shedeur Sanders has the things that I look for as an NFL starter. Number one, he doesn't turn the ball over. Number two, he's been consistent. Number three, you've seen it at all different levels, whether it was at Jacksonville State, whether it was at Colorado. Numbers, completion percentages were very similar. Touchdown percentages very similar. Interception rates were very similar. Now, you look at what he had to kind of put up with. I know Adam talked about the pocket presence. Sheduer does have some issues, and I'm not going to act like he's a perfect prospect. But all different guys that we've kind of seen undersized and not have the cannon arms, such as the Baker Mayfields, such as the Bryce Youngs, such as Jared Goffs, who all number one, this guy actually looks to me that has a skill set that I think projects very well in the NFL, which is he's willing to push the ball down the field. He's not just a guy who's going to spread it and throw it underneath. Now, he's very good at that, one of the PFF's highest scored guys, but also a guy who's a great processor, a guy who grew up idolizing Tom Brady, who wants to play the quarterback position from the neck up. I know everybody's enamored with athletes and guys scrambling around, and I know we're fantasy. But if Anthony Richardson, who is one of the most incredible athletes you've seen, can't get on the field and play, then he doesn't have a fantasy value. And to me, Shedeur Sanders is definitely a guy that once he's on the field, it's going to be hard to get him off because his team's going to rally around him. I think he's going to win. And I think he has the production and the skill set that's going to be able to do well in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you're saying about Shedeur. He is accurate. There's no doubt about it. It had the second best adjusted completion percentage in the nation last year.
Highest completion percentage in FBS history.
Yeah. I disagree, however, that he actively looks to throw the ball down the field. That's not what he tries to do. In fact, when I watch the tape, for the most part, if it's available to him, he does take that shorter throw.
Well, the air yards don't necessarily match that, Dan. That's kind of why I brought up what the air yards were for.
His average depth of target. His average depth of target was only 134th ranked. It was only 8.1. It absolutely does on that count.
Which I bring that up because that's very similar to what Cam Ward had at Washington State with a rich, crappier offensive line. So I think when you have a guy who could have, if Shedeur Sanders would have stayed this year and went to play Alabama next year or went to Ohio State next year, what kind of numbers could he put up? And that's kind of where I think we get so enamored with what we saw Cam Ward do, and we like the idea of we could be Patrick Mahomes, and I love him. To my comp, Dan, is Zach Wilson, because I love Zach Wilson, but I also realize that you talked about the turnovers, that gets you on the bench. And if you're not completely accurate, and it's not just being completion percentage accuracy, it's getting the ball where it needs to be, which Cam Ward does struggle at times. He gets the ball in the area, but it's not always where it needs to be for accuracy-wise. I think Sheduer does all of those things, and we've seen guys like undrafted guys like Brock Purdy become guys who would be franchise quarterbacks because what they're able to do is throw in the middle of the field. I'm not saying Danny's throwing 40-yard bombs, but he did lead all the last 2 years, both in PFF last 2 years, he had the most attempts of 40 yards. He had the highest second highest attempts of 40 yards and had the second highest completion percentage over 40 yards. So it's not a guy who's just dinking and dunking out there.
Not this past year. Not this past year. His
40-yard passes?
40-yard passes this past year, he was not. He was actually down, I believe it was 40th in completion percentage in pass attempts over 40 this past year. 2023, he was second.
So the last 2 years combined. I'm sorry. It's the last 2 years combined. So you're right.
So I just wanted to make sure it was clear from that standpoint. Look, I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be a very good NFL starting game manager, but this is a fantasy show. And I don't know from a fantasy perspective what you're really going to get out of Sanders. He's not mobile. Minus 176 yards over the last couple of years. He's not going to get you big splashy plays consistently. That's not his game. He's going to game manage. I have Teddy Bridgewater comp to him, and I had a higher grade on Teddy Bridgewater than I did on Shedeur Sanders coming out as well. Because with Bridgewater,
how does Jared Goff get points? How does Baker Mayfield get points? How does Joe Burrow get points?
I'm going to get to that in a second. First of all, Joe Burrow's a way better prospect, and he does get the big throws, and he does throw it all around the field. That's not even a comp, and he's a better, more mobile than this. So is Baker Mayfield.
Why?
But besides all, because they get more rushing yards and they use their legs more. That's why it's more productive. That's how that works. They're both more productive than he was as a rusher in college. But besides that, Teddy Bridgewater, you got a game manager. That's what you got. His best year is 2015. He had 14 passing touchdowns, and he had 192 rushing yards that season. So when you're a game manager, even if you're playing a lot, you're not always going to get a ton of fantasy points. Now, some of those other guys you mentioned who rely on accuracy and processing to be fantasy stars, well, they had the opportunity, one way or another, to land in high-octane offenses. Maybe Shedeur Sanders gets that. I don't think he's going to get that with Cleveland. I don't think he's going to get that with New York. His best bet for his fantasy output is to fall. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I still have money on him falling outside the top 10 because I think ultimately people are not that in love with him. We'll have to see. Based on some of the moves or lack of moves that the Browns have made, I've begun to question that. But that's what it takes for a guy like that to be fantasy relevant, in my view. Which is why, we'll get to him in a little bit, because I want to ask Jeremy and Adam about Shedeur Sanders, but it's why I have Jackson Dart ranked ahead of Shedeur Sanders, because I know what you're going to get with his legs. I know you're going to get some of those flashy plays. Do I think Jackson Dart from an NFL standpoint...
What is Jackson Dart's 40?
Do I think Jackson Dart from an NFL standpoint will be a better prospect than Shedeur Sanders as an NFL starter? No, I do not. But you are going to get more of his legs, who had almost 500 yards rushing. You are going to get more big plays down the field. So that's why I have him ranked a little bit differently in that standpoint. Jeremy, what are your thoughts there?
Between Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, or just on Shedeur Sanders?
Either way.
So Shedeur Sanders, I think, is an interesting case. He's not an elevator as much as we want to try to make him to be that. He really isn't. And I know we're talking about drafted and not drafted, but Jimmy Horn's a pretty dang good college receiver. Will Shepard was also a pretty high prospected player as well. Really fell short a little bit this past year. There's also LeJohntay Wester, I think is his name, also a pretty solid receiver for Shedeur Sanders. So he had talent. And the argument will say that he had more talent or less talent than Cam Ward, I would continue to disagree as well, outside of Xavier Restrepo. And even at Restrepo, like, they weren't a super talented squad in Miami. Like,
and the one won't, and then the offensive line is not better.
To be honest,
and there's a tight end. The Rowe is going to get drafted.
Arroyo missed a lot of games as well, and Xavier Restrepo may not get drafted. That 4.8 is going to sink him terribly. So I wouldn't be so sure to say that also Jimmy Horn's not going to be, or LeJohntay Wester won't be, or Will Shepard for that. To be honest, I think that when it's all said and done, I think that Cam Ward is heads and heels ahead of Shedeur Sanders as far as a prospect goes, just because the game is now. I will agree, Chris, you're 100% as far as the accuracy goes with Cam Ward. He's just a little late. He isn't a very great anticipatory thrower. Where Shedeur Sanders excels is what in my scouting report, for example, I basically verbed it as, you could tell that he grew up with a dad that was an NFL Hall of Famer, because he's mechanically sound. He does what you're supposed to. He looks like he was coached well, and he's getting the best that he can because he's coached well. He doesn't have the physical tools to be an elite NFL quarterback. He just doesn't. He doesn't have the arm strength. When he tries to throw down the field, he's underthrowing guys, he's overthrowing guys. It's just not there for him deep down the field. If he's trying to throw across hashes, you saw that Nebraska game where they telemarked it very easily, picked him off, and walked in the end zone. Like, he doesn't have the arm strength. His ball has a significant arc.
I can say that game for Cam Ward, though, too. I mean,
Ward struggles, but that's this whole class. Jackson Dart does as well. I mean, arguably, Jackson Dart's the best deep ball thrower of the class. So, like, you can argue it in every category, but I just think the issue with Shedeur Sanders is he is so unmobile. The other issue is I said it as well, as far as, like, not that he's broken yet, but, like, he does bail early. He is almost programmed, like, to be playing with a bad offensive line. That's part of it. But then you see reps where he stands in there tall, he takes the hit and delivers the ball. So it's a very inconsistent thing with Shedeur Sanders at times, as far as, like, bailing early. So you're not really sure what we're going to get. But the positive side, like you said, Chris, is he is calm, cool. The lights aren't going to be too big for him. He grew up with Dion as a dad. So, like,
he didn't turn up all over with all that going on. I mean, I think that's huge.
And he does that
and had a high completion percentage. I mean, that is, we knock all these things, but he completed 74% of his passes. I don't know how he's like
category.
Well,
like, why does
but Tua was not the top 5 player. I mean, I think people like Bo Nix, Jeremy. That was what Bo Nix did, and like that's all he did last year. So my point
being, that's what we're getting is Bo Nix, Tua Tagovailoa. They're not elevators, Bo Nix isn't amazing. Bo Nix was great because he had his rushing ability and was getting the ball out of his hands. Like, I mean, that's what he does.
What
That's
they
what
are
Tua
is
does. That's what
most of the quarterbacks outside like 5 quarterbacks do. That's what I'm
Correct.
getting at.
Yeah, no, and I'm going to 100% agree with you. But that doesn't lead to fantasy success. That doesn't lead to longevity. The overall quarterback position at the NFL level right now is just bad. Like, I mean, you had Tommy DeVito starting games. Like, it's bad outside of the elite few. And then after that, it gets very dicey and rough. I think that Shedeur Sanders is the second best quarterback. I do think that. I do think that there's a lot to like in this game. And Chris, you outlined a lot of it. Do I think he's going to press the ball down the field at the NFL level? No, I don't think he has the arm talent. But does he have the talent to deliver the ball on time, in rhythm, in a very good offense that's built that way? The a-las of the Rams, the Miami Dolphins, the San Francisco 49ers. Those situations, if he falls into one of those, are very good for him. But if he falls into a situation where he's asked to be the guy, for example, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, like, that's not him. Joe Burrow. Like, I mean, Burrow's got more playmakers, but like,
that's not Cam Ward either, though.
And it may not be, but Cam Ward has more of that physical tools to overcome that. Shedeur Sanders doesn't. Do you know what I mean? So, like, yes, Shedeur Sanders is a better processor. Yes, he's more accurate. Yes, he has the anticipatory. Is his mechanics cleaner? Yes. The questions will really come, where does he land? Can he get the support? It's skills. It's not skills. I'm not saying he's unskilled. But it's a marriage of it all that really has to come down to it. And I think the issues that Cam Ward have can be fixed because his completion percentage isn't terrible. You're talking about a guy at 65. It's not like it's Anthony Richardson's 55. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I like Cam. Like I said, I think Cam Ward's good, but he's been consistently around that. I guess that's what I was trying to point out. Like, I'm not a guy who's against Cam Ward, and I definitely think he has explosive abilities. But what he also has is a lot of things. His mechanics are poor. He does do lock on the guys. He does throw late a little bit. He relies on an arm. He doesn't have a Josh Allen arm or a Patrick Mahomes arm. He got a decent arm. And if Cam Ward came out last year, people all of a sudden love him now. But Cam Ward was on people's radar at Washington State. They liked him as a possible guy. Adam, you jump in whenever. Adam and I talked about him a lot last year. That Cam Ward was a guy like, hey, maybe he comes out, we like it. But as a sleeper, it was not as a guy who we thought was going to be explosive. We gave him that title because it's like what he did for Miami shines, but what Sheduer gets the same look at is like, well, you're just, we saw that already from you, even though you won 9 games, even though you put up similar numbers, even though you were a Heisman finalist as well, you're just not even the same class as Cam Ward. And I think that's something that I struggle with because you talk about the things about, Sheduer does process all the things which are important for picking up blitzes, are important for, making sure for pressures. And it is things that I can understand bad habits, and I definitely, don't want to have somebody who's going to have bad habits. You see Jimmy G, you see different guys, Derek Carr, when they get in that bad habits of getting hit. We saw Jared Goff go through that as well. But I think one of the biggest things is if guys can process, they know where to go with the ball, they know what they're supposed to do with the ball, and he's not a statue. Like, people can act like Shedeur Sanders can't move. That's another thing. It's like this. I struggle with all these things that we knock on him, but yet he was able to complete all his percentage passes. He didn't have a good line. It was a Heisman finalist, and he was throwing to a two-way player most of the time. You talk about those other players. I mean, they're guys, I guess, but I also look at, this is programs that were nowhere. And this guy put 2 programs on the map. And I think that's something that we talk about, like, it's a lot about winning as a quarterback position. And this is one guy actually showed me he did it.
I'm going to throw this.
I'm too far.
Just fair shake real quick. Like, Miami was pretty bad too prior to Cam Ward, just saying. They were.
It was a 1 win in like 10 years, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I know Colorado's ascension was better, but I'm just saying Miami was kind of bad. Yeah, wasn't what they were living up to.
I want to throw this in here too, and then get to Adam on all this. So the other guy that he's comped to quite a bit is Geno Smith. And I see a lot of similarities between Shedeur Sanders and somebody who later on in his career did wind up being a low-end QB1 for one season. But similar to Geno, this is what I worry about. If you're going to be a game managing type and you don't wind up in a situation with one of these great offenses, which he's not poised to do, then he could easily be on a bench. And then if you're going from a dynasty standpoint, if you spend a first-round draft capital on a guy like Shedeur Sanders, you're not keeping him for 6 years waiting for him to fall into that situation. He's going to be a waiver wire pickup. It's the other reason why I have him ranked as quarterback 3, draft capital, keeping him there. But Adam, jump in here, buddy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys have hit on a lot of it. I guess the areas where I'll, throw some of my disagreements. First of all, I think we're being a little harsh on his mobility. I know he didn't use it all that much, but to me, this was much more of a CJ Stroud, I'm not using it, than I'm incapable. I don't think he's unathletic. I would think, to me, he's more athletic than Baker Mayfield. Now, some of the other guys you compared him to, I would agree. But then a Baker, I think I can use his athleticism in the red zone in a way similar to what Tampa Bay was doing this year. It's not crazy. I'm not building an option offense around him. Right. I think he's got that level. I would give Burrow the better long speed, but I think he moves in short areas a little bit better than Burrow does. Now, partially that's because Burrow's had some knee injuries, but that's besides the point. Otherwise, I mean, I agree. I don't think he's one that it goes down the field as much as I would personally like. I mean, this is a guy who I believe around 60% of his passes last season were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. This is a guy who, I mean, to me, when you talk about the ability to maybe take the next step and throw down the field more at the next level, who really struggles with pressure. And specifically when it comes to pressure, he's someone who, in my opinion, it was weird, right? I'm willing to forgive a guy who struggles with pressure from the interior. That's something that it takes quarterbacks the NFL level a long time to figure out. What worries me is I thought tackle pressure specifically got to him way more than I would prefer for a quarterback who is one who doesn't have those tools, right? If that happens to, I mean, even an Anthony Richardson or a Cam Ward or whoever we're going to take as these raw guys, they have the arm strength to go off the back foot and potentially still make a play. I think if I've got Cam Ward who's backing up instead of stepping up into the pocket, I don't know that he has the physical ability to throw himself out of that situation. And again, I think the short area speed we're underrating a little bit here, and he can kind of work his way around that way, but it's with being struggling under pressure, I would hope that you have more tools to overcome that. The completion percentage from a clean pocket is great, and if he has an opportunity to just get the ball out of his hands quickly, I think he can be successful. I don't think Cleveland would be that bad, to be honest with you. I think they've got guys who can get open quickly and can make who can catch the ball in traffic, like a Tillman, for example. You could use as a West Coast big target-esque guy. To me, he's not the guy who I'm going to gamble on big in Dynasty, but he is someone who, if he was a low-end starting quarterback at the NFL for the next 6-7 years, I wouldn't be past it. I mean, look, Kenny Pickett got a good handful of years. Daniel Jones made it deep into a second contract. He's better than those guys coming out to me by far. So I do think he's a real starting quarterback. Just for me, from the perspective of fantasy football and Dynasty, I'm not super excited about what he can be. In terms of the upside, I think he's someone who you look to upgrade over him as a super flex guy when you can.
Well, so Adam, go ahead and take us into the Jackson Dart part of that conversation, who is on most people's, within the top 3. These are the top 3 consensus quarterbacks we're talking about. Where does he stack up with value? And maybe if he is taken a little bit later, and therefore probably you can take him a little bit later in your rookie drafts, does he present more value to you as a later round guy?
I'm a lot lower on Jackson Dart than most people are, I think. Look, to me, I think all of the quarterbacks outside of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, you are stripping down to the bones and teaching how to play quarterback. They're all guys who have physical abilities and skill sets. And Jeremy, I believe you brought this up. I do think he throws potentially the best deep ball in this class, for example. I think his actual throwing form and technique is really good. But how he's reading the game and perceiving offenses, I don't exactly think is quite an NFL caliber yet. I think he is someone who at that system he was in is very much so not translatable to the NFL level. But all the guys, again, after those first two, you're having similar issues in that sense. But for me, he just, if I'm going to teach you how to play quarterback, he's not my preference. But what I will say, I think his ceiling is pretty solid. He's actually also up there in that completion percentage category as being pretty accurate. I mean, let's talk about the guys we just talked about, because they're kind of the cream of the crop in that category. Over the last 2 seasons, Shedeur Sanders was in the 92nd percentile, Cam Ward 90th. Jackson Dart's hanging in right there right at 88th, and the big time throw rate is actually higher than either of them over the last 2 seasons. Problem is, pressure to sack isn't that great either, but also not a guy who's turning the ball over like crazy. But again, the system is a big part of that. On tape, I thought the pressure to sack showed up a lot more candidly than it did with it felt more similar to Shedeur Sanders than it did to Cam Ward, despite it statistically being closer to Cam Ward. I think he was just able to get the ball out a lot quicker, just given the system he was in. Pocket presence wasn't really a strength for him. And he missed some weird layups underneath at times. It's one of those things where, again, I think the form down the field was pretty good when he got the chance to step into balls, but in the tighter pockets, it got a little weird for me. Someone who has NFL talent physically, has the technique, but again, I think you're teaching him how to read offenses, and that's not something that I've seen go all that well all that often.
No, that's fair too. And again, look, I'm the one person on here who has Jackson Dart ranked number 2. Part of that is because of how much I just don't really care about this quarterback class outside of Cam Ward, or I should say, I don't have as much hope for this quarterback class giving me fantasy dividends outside of Cam Ward. And going back to it of, look, I know with Jackson Dart, I confident Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones, for all his flaws, was a fantasy relevant quarterback for a stretch there, because you're going to get some rushes, you're going to get some deep throws. And if he has more than just, a third string wide receiver as a starting wide receiver, he might be able to make a few plays. I'm not a big guy on Jackson Dart as an NFL starter for longevity purposes. I'm not. Look, I love Trey Harris, and this isn't the wide receiver show. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks. But just watching Trey Harris's tape, the amount of throws down the field that were late, overthrown, not layered because they were dark, they're line drives. He doesn't really have the ability to layer them in there. I mean, it drove me insane. The fact that Trey Harris was able to make some of the plays he was able to make on some of those errant passes just speaks to his talent, but it also speaks to Jackson Dart. Like, you're getting a uber talented wide receiver having to make acrobatic plays because you can't put it where you're supposed to put it. And I do think there was a lot of questions with his ball placement, and in particular, this kind of goes to Adam's point, but post-snap read ain't there. So that was one of the issues I saw on tape with him as well. But are you going to get some mobility? Yeah. Are you going to get some deep throws? Yeah. Do I think he should be drafted in the first round? No, I don't. I have a 3rd round grade on Jackson Dart. I also have a 3rd round grade on Shedeur Sanders. So that kind of tells you where I'm at with them. And even Cam Ward, again, my comp to Jordan Love kind of tells you where I have him. Draft capital, low end round 1, high end round 2 type of player, but NFL needs quarterbacks, and these guys get the draft capital assigned to it. For Dart, if he winds up on the Steelers, forget everything I just said. You can flush him down the toilet. I'll send him lower than the sleeper guy I'm going to talk about later in the show. If he winds up on the Steelers, that would just be a terrible fit from a schematic standpoint, because he'll never get to learn the quarterback position. But Jeremy, your take on Jackson Dart?
So I think Dart and Shedeur Sanders are pretty close in a way of how they operated their offenses. Both of them ran that similarity in the RPO style offense. Both were asked to get the ball out on time, in rhythm, into the short to intermediate type of areas of the field while testing the deeper portions at less regularity. I would agree. I think that at times Dart's deep throws would deteriorate as far as the accuracy kind of went. I think as far as the arm talent goes, and consistently, although it was inconsistent, consistently he was probably the best of those 3. They're all not the best deep ball throwers, but I do think Dart has more physical traits than Shedeur Sanders. But where Dart really falls apart for me is the mechanic side of the game, where Shedeur Sanders is very clean, fluid, makes it kind of look easy, gets the ball out on time. When that's all working for Dart, it looks great. When it's all perfect and dandy, and he's got a clean pocket, he reads the defense well and can step into the ball and put it where it has to be, he can do it very well with like some of the best. The issue that I see a lot is that he disconnects his upper body and lower body, leans a little bit too much on the arm talent when he probably shouldn't. That results in those missed layups in the short areas of the field. He's not really stepping through the ball. The ball's coming out a little high. As well as he kind of has a less of a pocket awareness than Shedeur Sanders. Like Sanders would bail early too, but Dart wouldn't necessarily bail, but he would panic. And that's where that mechanics broke down as well. So Dart has a way to go, but I think he's closer to Shedeur Sanders. I'm fine with someone having him at 2 instead of, say, Shedeur Sanders. I don't necessarily love that people who have him ahead of Cam Ward. I can get it because like this class is very close, like they really are. But I do think that for me with Jackson Dart, it's been a late rise. He feels a little bit like the NFL just feels like they need a quarterback. He's got the physical tools. He's got the rushing upside, production at the collegiate level. Seems like it. Maybe we'll give it a shot. But there's definitely question marks. I do think that he has a way to go. Although I will disagree with you, Dan, as far as like, I think Pittsburgh would be okay. I think they would kind of run that Arthur Smith, run the ball pretty heavy, build him. Maybe they would let him run more of a shotgun RPO, a little bit of what we saw from Desmond Ridder in his time in Atlanta. And maybe we get a little bit of that. I don't think that would be terrible for Jackson Dart. Now, would he learn how to play the quarterback position? No, but he may never, a la Anthony Richardson at this point in time. So if he can fit into a system that works for him, let it go. I mean, that's what we get from Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's good. I'm not saying he's not, but the only reason Brock Purdy is because he got that opportunity in that system that fits him perfectly and fits what he does well perfectly. Josh Allen's Josh Allen because he ended up in Buffalo with a team that let him do what he does well. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes because he landed with Andy Reid in a system that lets him do what he does well. Why did Zach Wilson fail? Why have so many Jets quarterbacks failed? Because they aren't letting them do what they do well. They're trying to make them fit into wrong systems. So if he finds that right spot, I do think Jackson Dart could be well. The same with Shedeur Sanders and the same with Cam Ward. I really do think that there's some longevity here in quarterbacks, a ton of fantasy upside, elite quarterbacks by no means, but they definitely can fit into that mold of an NFL starter for sure. All three of these guys. So